The museum annex was originally built as the Fort Theater in the 1930s by the 25th Infantry. And it was a theater until the mid-1970s, and then it became part of the museum. There were displays here interpreting the Old West and the Army's role in that. And then a few years ago, they decided to make this for the unmanned aircraft display, drones, effectively. And there was a concrete slab poured, which is what we're standing on, and all these various aircraft of different eras, going back to the 1950s to the current time frame, were installed here in the museum. It covers a little bit of the period of the post in the late 40s, early 50s, and then the primary focus is on the unmanned aircraft used here at Fort Huachuca or tested here. We have them going back to the SD-1. That's one of the first aircraft used here at the post. Very rare now because most of them were destroyed. It landed by a parachute in the center portion, and most of them hit the ground pretty hard.
Its engine is cut off and a parachute inside released. The photos taken by this drone were developed less than an hour after the original launching. A dramatic demonstration of military science in action at Fort Huachuca.
That's one of the few survivors that had 50 missions. You can see that painted on the side of the fuselage, which is kind of interesting. They were used for surveillance. They never saw actual combat because by the time we were involved in Vietnam, this was way obsolete. Here you've got movies going back to the 1950s, talking about the beginning of drones here at Fort Huachuca and to much later incarnations used in the Middle East or in Afghanistan. And it's kind of nice, and I find it interesting to see the period films.
There she goes, the new pilotless plane, the drone.
The Aguila is one of the experimental drones here that was tested at Fort Huachuca. It didn't work as well as the Army had hoped, unfortunately. It's a very interesting design, basically a delta wing, but the huge projection on the belly of it with the camera equipment and whatnot, it kind of destabilized it. It was launched from a truck, fired it and catapulted into the air, and then the recovery was real interesting. It utilized a large net, just as you would capture bats or birds for scientific study. The Aguila didn't always land in the net as the Army technicians wanted it to, so sometimes they crashed. We don't teach the class, but there's classes conducted in here from the aviation portion of the Army, from Black Tower. And they use this because of the historical context of the aircraft that are housed in here. It's actually an introduction to Army aviation. So they started the Civil War with the balloons and cover the punitive expedition, World War I, and so on. We have people that have served here all the way back to the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s come here with their families, sometimes grandchildren. When people can visit is Tuesday through Saturday from 9 to 4. Those are the hours of both the main museum across the street and the annex here.